Today I'm going to be making some meatballs that can be served in a tomato sauce and then put with either pasta or crusty bread as a main meal. The first part of the recipe requires you to take some white bread, some stale bread, and to soak it in milk. So I put mine into a small dish and I'm just going to pour a little bit of milk on top. And the idea is that you soak the bread. Then later on you're going to squeeze the bread. You're going to break it up a little bit and add that into the meatballs to make them a slightly lighter texture. So I'm just going to put that now to one side whilst I get on with making the rest of the mixture. Whilst the bread is soaking, I'm then going to start preparing the ingredients both for the tomato sauce and to put in with the meat later. So I'm going to start by taking some garlic, and I need 2 cloves of garlic. I'm going to peel the skin off that, and then I'm going to very finely grate it, or of course you can chop it if you prefer. One of the cloves is going to go in with the meat, and the other one is going to go in with the tomato sauce. Okay, so I'm just going to leave that on there for a second. The next stage then comes the onion. So I'm going to halve my onion. One half of it is going to go in my sauce. I'm just going to leave that to one side again just for a second. And the other half is going to go into the meatballs. Now the half that's going to go into the meatballs, because I want it extremely fine, I'm actually going to grate it on the big holes of the grater, which of course could cause a few tears along the way. But hopefully I'll get some fairly small pieces in there. These extra bits that I've got there, then I'm just going to chop up in a second by hand. So that's my chopped bit in there. And these bits actually, I think these are a little bit coarse, so I think I'll probably just use these in the sauce instead. So the rest of the onion that I've got, I'm just going to use the bridge and claw technique to cut it. And then I'm just going to pop those into my pan where I'm going to make the sauce in a minute, just so that they're out of the way. And so that hopefully my eyes will not water anymore, and I'm also going to pop into there the garlic. So I've now got one garlic in my bowl with my onion, and I've got one in my pan for my sauce. To continue with the sauce then, I'm going to now fry the onion and garlic until it's lightly brown. I'm going to add into it then a tin of chopped tomatoes, including the juice, and about half a teaspoon of oregano and some seasoning. So I've put the onion and the garlic into the pan, and I'm just going to fry those now until they start to take a little bit of colour. They've been frying now for just a couple of minutes, and they're starting to change colour. So I've just added into that the tin of tomatoes, and then I'm going to also add into it a few mixed herbs, oregano, and some salt and pepper. And then we're going to mix that around and then leave that simmering. So whilst the tomato sauce is simmering, I'm then going to get the meatball mixture ready. So I've got my bowl with my garlic and my very small amount of onion in. And I'm going to add into it 2 different meats. Now you don't have to use both, okay? But this was the recipe that I had. So it was minced pork, of which I've got 250 grams, and minced beef. People also very successfully make meatballs with sausage. Take them out of the skins and use those instead. So I'm just going to break that up a little bit. So obviously they're going to be combined. At this stage, because I've got clean hands, I'm going to add into it a little bit of oregano again to give it an Italian flavour. I'm going to add into it some salt and some pepper. I'm also going to add into it some grated Parmesan cheese, just about a tablespoon. And mix that round. In a minute I'm going to put my hands in, but I'm leaving that just till the last minute. Because obviously once you get covered in raw meat, it's a little bit more tricky to do things. So that's those two roughly combined. And then the next stage then is to get that very unlikely looking bread that we had earlier, and to take the very soggy bread, to squeeze out any excess liquid, so any excess milk goes out back into the dish. And then you very carefully crumble that into your meat mixture. So remember, the purpose of this is to make the meat mixture lighter. Okay. Now, because my bread was actually quite a coarse bread, any of the bits that are like crusty, I'm not going to put in. So I'm just putting in the actual white bit. It's a little bit like, but when you make burgers, sometimes you add into them a breadcrumb mixture, or you add in oats, just so that they're not quite so dense. And then when I've done that, I'm going to give it a mix up. Okay, on to the shaping then. So I've got now my meat mixture, and what I need now is to get my hands in and to start putting this into balls. Now I've decided I'm going to shape mine onto a plate, and the recipe says to roll them into balls that are roughly the size of a golf ball. Okay, so the key thing is that the balls are roughly the same size. Otherwise, when you come to cook them, they'll cook at different rates. Now, if you want to weigh yours to make sure they're roughly equal, you can do. Just make sure you put something in the scales or on the scales whilst you're doing so, because you don't want to coat anything in raw meat. And then the next stage then obviously is going to be to fry them. So the tomato sauce that we made earlier, I have now covered and put out of the way whilst I get on with browning the meatballs. It has thickened quite a bit. So I'm just now heating up the oil in which to fry the meatballs. From the mixture I ended up with 15, and each one was roughly about 30 grams. So I put one in so that you can see that it's starting to sizzle, because there's no point filling the pan with meatballs if the temperature isn't correct, because otherwise they just absorb the extra fat. We want them to brown reasonably quickly. So I'm now just going to add the rest into the pan. Now, how many you do at once will depend very much on the size of your pan. Mine is actually quite large, and you don't want to crowd them out too much so that they start steaming, but you can see that mine is still frying away quite happily. So I've just turned mine over, with the exception of that last one. I've used some tongs to do mine. And then I'm going to leave them frying again till they brown on this one side. The important thing is to not keep fiddling with them. You need to leave them long enough to form a crust so that they don't start falling apart. You can see that they brown quite nicely now. I've turned them over one more time so that the other side, the final side, is browning. So in a few minutes then they'll be ready to put into the sauce. I decided in fact that it might actually be easier to pour the tomato sauce over the meatballs to save disturbing the meatballs and putting them in a small pan. So I've poured the tomato sauce over, and then I'm just going to stir them round to coat. Like so. And then I'm going to put my lid back on. If you don't have a lid for your frying pan, then you can just cover it in foil. And then I'm going to leave those to simmer then for about 15 minutes, checking them every now and again to make sure that they don't need any more liquid. The meatballs have been cooking now for about 10 minutes. So you can see the sauce is still got some moisture in it, which is important. and the meatballs are looking fine. They're not sticking or drying out. So I'm just going to leave that now probably for another 5 minutes, and then they'll be ready to serve. To go with the spaghetti and meatballs that I'm going to serve, I'm now actually going to make some garlic bread. So I've bought sort of half-size baguette, which I'm going to use, and I'm going to slice it not quite all the way through into thinnish pieces. I can also do these with those heart-baked baguettes without doing any further cooking. They work absolutely fine. And then I've already made my garlic butter. So I took about 25 grams of salted butter. I put it into a small dish with some garlic, which I did on the microplane to grate it up. And I melted those together along with a tiny bit of parsley. So what I'm going to do is to take the foil that I'm actually going to cook my bread on and put that on the work surface before I then spread on the garlic butter, so that any drips will simply go onto the foil rather than getting them all over the work surface. Now it's perfectly possible to do this using just softened butter, whichever you prefer, and you can actually do it with oil if you wanted to have a vegan alternative. I quite like a lot of garlic in mine. And then I'm going to wrap it back up in the foil. And then later on, when I'm ready to have dinner, I'm going to just put it in the oven to warm through, which will take about 15 minutes. Okay, so it's important that you try and get similar amount of garlic and butter in all the pieces, because otherwise the people who end up with a bit on the ends does look a little bit sad when you cut it up. Okay, and then I'm just going to make a parcel of that, wrap it up like that, put it onto a baking tray, and then put it in the oven at about 190 for 10 or 15 minutes. And towards the end of that, I'll open it up so that it gets a chance to brown. When the garlic bread is done, it will be nice and golden brown and crispy. And there we have the pasta with the meatballs and the garlic bread ready to serve.